The sound of the slap echoed across the weapons qualification range like a gunshot. 83 pairs of eyes turned toward the small woman who had just hit the concrete floor. Her cheek burned red, the handprint already forming across pale skin. Her technician's cap tumbled away, rolling to a stop against an ammunition crate. Staff Sergeant Donovan Keller stood over her, his hand still raised, palm open. 6'2" of muscle and ego wrapped in a Ranger instructor's uniform. The morning sun caught the combat patch on his shoulder, the one he wore like a medal, despite never having earned it in actual combat. His shadow fell across the woman at his feet like a judgment. "I asked you one last time." His voice carried across the training yard, designed to humiliate, designed to break. "Give me the weapon."
We stand united with
Evelyn
a shared
Thorne,
purpose.
maintenance technician,
Your
oil-stained
dedication
uniform, dark
and
blonde
teamwork
hair,
will
pulled
lead
back
us
in a
to
tight bun,
success.
slowly pushed herself up from the ground. She said nothing, just quietly picked up her cap, dusted it off with deliberate care, and placed it back on her head. Her movements were measured, controlled, carrying a precision that seemed almost mechanical. 29 years old, 4 years working in the shadows of Fort Bragg's inter-service training complex. 4 years of being invisible. 4 years of silence. "Can't talk," Donovan laughed, turning to the crowd of Rangers watching the scene unfold. "See this? This is why women don't belong here. Can't even inspect a rifle properly." Laughter rippled through the training yard. Not the full-throated kind, but the nervous laughter of young men desperate to belong. Desperate to prove themselves by joining in the humiliation of someone smaller, weaker, someone who couldn't fight back. Evelyn remained silent, but something in her eyes made Master Sergeant Isaac Grayson, standing in the far corner, pause mid-step. He narrowed his gaze, studying the way she stood. Shoulders open, center of gravity, low hands relaxed at her sides, but ready. That stance. He'd seen it before. In places where even Rangers weren't cleared to set foot. Isaac was 62 years old, his face weathered by 38 years of service and secrets. Desert Storm, 1991. SEAL Liaison Officer. He'd extracted operators from places that didn't exist on official maps. He knew what trained warriors looked like when they tried to blend into ordinary spaces. And this woman, this supposedly ordinary maintenance technician, stood like someone who had learned to be still in ways that most people never would. The kind of stillness that came from understanding violence so deeply that you didn't need to announce it. Colonel Nathaniel Pierce emerged from the command building, conducting his routine inspection. He stopped when he saw the scene before him. His weathered face, marked by 64 years of service and classified operations, revealed nothing. But his eyes, those pale blue eyes that had witnessed missions the world would never know about, locked onto Evelyn with an intensity that spoke of recognition. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through the morning air with the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers in places that didn't exist on official maps. Donovan spun around, his face still flushed with anger, and something else. Something darker. "Sir, this technician is refusing to release weapons to my unit. She's delaying our entire training schedule." Pierce looked at Evelyn, then at the M4 carbine in her hands. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Knowledge. Understanding. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the neutral expression of a commanding officer dealing with a routine matter. "Handle it, Staff Sergeant." Donovan grinned, the expression predatory. "Yes, sir." He stepped toward Evelyn, fists clenched. But in the next 20 minutes, everything he believed about himself, everything he thought he knew about strength and weakness, about warriors and civilians, would crumble to dust. The training yard at Joint Tactical Training Complex, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, buzzed with the controlled chaos of an inter-service combat readiness evaluation. Over 80 personnel from Army Rangers Marine Force Recon and various support units had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine qualification day. The humidity hung thick in the air, mixing with gun oil and testosterone, creating an atmosphere that was part gymnasium, part proving ground. Evelyn returned to her workstation without a word. Her movements remained measured and deliberate as she continued inspecting the rack of M4 carbines awaiting distribution. Her fingers moved across each weapon with a precision that seemed almost supernatural, checking chambers, testing trigger assemblies, examining firing pins under the harsh fluorescent lights of the armory alcove. Each inspection took exactly 47 seconds. Not 46, not 48. Exactly 47 seconds per weapon. Donovan watched her retreat with barely concealed contempt. He turned to his group of rangers, voice pitched to carry across the yard. 20 minutes behind schedule, because some grease monkey thinks she knows weapons better than soldiers who actually use them. Sergeant Fiona Ashford materialized at the adjacent supply station, her red hair catching the morning light. She'd been watching the confrontation with growing concern, her hands gripping a clipboard like it might anchor her to something solid in a world that had suddenly tilted wrong. Fiona had been in the army long enough to recognize the difference between someone who was beaten and someone who was choosing not to fight. She'd seen it before in soldiers who'd come back from places they couldn't talk about, doing jobs they'd never acknowledge. The way they moved, the way they watched, the way they existed in spaces, as if always calculating angles and exits. She approached Evelyn as the confrontation temporarily dispersed, the crowd moving toward the shooting lanes for the morning's first qualification round. "Hey, you okay?" Evelyn looked up, and for just a moment, something human flickered behind her guarded expression. Recognition of kindness in a place that had offered precious little. "I'm fine, Sergeant Ashford." "Fiona, we've been over this." She leaned against the workbench, keeping her voice low, creating a bubble of privacy in the public space. "You should report him. That was assault, clear as day. He's got connections." Evelyn resumed her inspection of the weapon rack, her movements never faltering. "Friends in high places. I've seen his type before. They always have protection." Fiona studied her colleague's profile, noting the faint scar that traced along her jawline, the kind of scar that didn't come from kitchen accidents or automotive mishaps, the kind that came from violence survived and healed. She noted the calluses on Evelyn's hands, too thick for someone who just cleaned weapons. The way her eyes constantly scanned the environment even while her hands worked at tracking movement, assessing threats, maintaining awareness. "Where'd you serve?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Evelyn was quiet for a beat too long. "I'm just a technician. Started 4 years ago. Nothing special." But Fiona had been a supply NCO for 12 years. She knew how to read people, how to spot the things they tried to hide. And everything about Evelyn Thorne screamed that nothing special was the biggest lie she'd ever heard. The morning progressed with the grinding efficiency of military routine. Trainees cycled through the qualification lanes in groups of 8, their rifle reports creating a staccato rhythm that echoed off the concrete barriers. Donovan prowled the firing line like a predator, his voice a constant bark of criticism and condescension. Finding fault, demanding perfection, using his authority like a blunt instrument. Evelyn worked in the background, invisible to most essential to all. She cleared jammed weapons, replaced worn components, ensured that every trainee who stepped up to the line had a functioning rifle in their hands. Her movements were efficient, almost choreographed, each motion flowing into the next with a precision that seemed unconscious, the product of repetition burned so deep it had become instinct. Corporal Jason Rivera stood at lane 7, his hands trembling so badly that the M4 shook in his grip. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning's relative cool, and his breathing came in short, sharp gasps that had nothing to do with physical exertion. 20 years old and already carrying ghosts, his eyes had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen things that didn't fit in the neat boxes the civilian world demanded. Evelyn noticed. Of course she noticed. She set down the rifle she was cleaning and made her way to his station, her approach so quiet that he didn't hear her until she spoke. "Square your shoulders." Rivera flinched, nearly dropping his weapon. His finger went dangerously close to the trigger muscle memory from some other place, some other time, trying to take over. "Easy." Her voice was low, meant only for him, gentle without being condescending. "Keep your finger indexed along the receiver." "Good. Now take a breath, hold it, let half out." His breathing steadied almost against his will. The trembling in his hands decreased by measurable degrees. "The target isn't the enemy." She adjusted his elbow position with a gentle touch, the kind of correction that came from understanding, not judgment. "It's just a piece of paper. Paper can't hurt you." How did you? He couldn't finish the question. Couldn't articulate the confusion, the relief, the sudden understanding that someone else knew. Someone else understood. I've seen that look before. She stepped back, giving him space, giving him dignity. You're not alone, Corporal, and it doesn't make you weak. Before he could respond, Donovan's voice cut across the range like a blade. What the hell do you think you're doing? Evelyn turned to face him, her expression neutral, professional, giving him nothing to grasp, nothing to use against her. His sight alignment was off. His sight alignment is my concern. Donovan stepped into her personal space, using his height to intimidate his physical presence as a weapon. You touch one of my trainees again, and I'll have you scrubbing latrines for a month. He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Matter of fact, I think you owe Private Garrett over there an apology. He's been waiting 15 minutes for his weapon because you're too busy playing instructor. Private First Class, Garrett Mitchell, appeared at Donovan's shoulder, a smirk spreading across his face like an infection. 22 years old, barely out of basic training, desperate to prove himself by being cruel to someone who couldn't fight back. Maybe she needs a reminder of where she belongs. He shoved a cart of empty magazines toward Evelyn, with enough force to send it careening into her hip. The impact was deliberate, calculated, not enough to cause serious injury, but enough to hurt, enough to humiliate. She stumbled but didn't fall. Her foot slid back in a lateral pivot, her weight redistributing with fluid grace. Her balance recovered in a fraction of a second, the movement so smooth it seemed almost rehearsed, almost like something drilled into muscle memory through countless repetitions. Master Sergeant Isaac Grayson saw it from 30 yards away. His coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. His eyes, pale gray and sharper than his 62 years, should allow tracked the movement with the analytical precision of someone who'd spent decades studying human motion in combat situations. That wasn't a stumble recovery. That was a trained response. Specific, deliberate. The kind of thing they drilled into you until it became reflex, until your body responded faster than your conscious mind could process. He'd seen that exact movement in one place during one assignment he wasn't supposed to talk about. Coronado, California, 1992. The place where they made SEALs. Oops, Garrett laughed, not even bothering to pretend it was an accident. His eyes gleamed with the cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Evelyn said nothing. She simply righted the cart and began organizing the scattered magazines with methodical precision. Each magazine placed with exact spacing, each movement controlled, each breath measured. Across the training yard, Warrant Officer Jasper Reed was conducting flight certification reviews. The helicopter pilot had 44 years on this earth and 8 years flying extract missions for Tier 1 operators. He'd seen the best of the best work under impossible conditions. He knew what excellence looked like when it was trying to hide. And something about the way that technician moved made him stop and watch. When Evelyn passed his station to retrieve a replacement barrel, he caught her eye. You move well for a maintenance tech. She met his gaze without flinching. Thank you, sir. Where'd you learn to recover balance like that lateral pivot when the cart hit you? That's not something people do naturally. Lots of practice, sir. This isn't exactly a gentle workplace. Reed studied her face, searching for something he couldn't quite name. Then he nodded slowly, filing the interaction away in a mental folder labeled Questions Without Answers. The morning's first crisis came at 11:47. A trainee at Lane 3, barely 19, and green as grass, had somehow managed to load a round while his weapon was pointed away from the range. The sound of the discharge was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet punched through the ceiling of the covered firing station, sending chunks of concrete raining down like deadly hail. Panic rippled through the trainees like a shockwave. Instructors shouted contradictory orders. Move back. Stay still. Put your weapon down. Keep your weapon up. The chaos of fear without leadership. The young soldier stood, frozen weapon still in his trembling hands. The barrel swept dangerously across the crowded range as he turned, trying to understand what had happened, what he'd done. 83 people in the path of a loaded weapon, held by someone in the grip of panic. Evelyn moved. She covered the 15 feet between her station and Lane 3 in under 2 seconds. No hesitation, no calculation, just movement, pure and immediate. Her hand closed over the rifle's barrel, pushing it toward the ground with controlled force, while her other hand found the magazine release. The magazine dropped. Her palm slapped the bolt catch, locking the action open. She cleared the chamber by touch, her eyes never leaving the terrified trainee's face. "You're okay." Her voice was calm, steady. The eye of the storm, the single point of control in absolute chaos. "Weapons safe, everyone's safe. Breathe." The whole sequence had taken less than 2 seconds. 1.8 seconds from movement to resolution. From potential tragedy to controlled situation. Silence fell over the range. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of shock. Of witnessing something that shouldn't have been possible. Isaac Grayson set down his coffee cup very carefully. His hands, steady as they'd been for 38 years of service, showed the faintest tremor. Beside him, Command Sergeant Major Elijah Grant had gone very still. His dark face had taken on an expression of dawning realization. "Isaac?" Grant's voice was barely above a whisper. "Did you see that?" "I saw it. That wasn't basic training. That wasn't even advanced training. I know. That was operator-level response time. Instinct, muscle memory." Grant turned to look at the small woman now helping the shaken trainee sit down on a nearby bench. Her movements gentle and reassuring. "Who the hell is she?" Isaac had no answer, but he intended to find out. He'd spent 6 months in 1991, attached to SEAL teams during Desert Storm reconnaissance operations. He'd seen the best operators in the world work. He knew what true expertise looked like when stripped of rank and ceremony, and what he'd just witnessed was expertise of the highest order. Donovan Keller, however, saw only an opportunity to reassert dominance. He stormed across the range, face purple with rage, each step heavy with barely contained violence. "Who gave you permission to touch that trainee? Who gave you permission to handle a weapon malfunction? You're a technician. You maintain equipment. That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be." Evelyn straightened to face him, and for just a moment, Isaac thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Not fear, not anger, something colder. Something that looked like calculation. The weapon was pointed at 34 people, including 3 officers and the base commander. For the first time, Donovan registered that Colonel Pierce had been watching from the observation platform. The colonel's face was unreadable, carved from stone by 6 decades of keeping secrets. But his presence added weight to the moment, turned a personal confrontation into something that would have consequences. "I don't care if it was pointed at the president." Donovan's voice dropped to a dangerous hiss, the kind of quiet that's more threatening than shouting. "You do not step outside your lane, ever. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Staff Sergeant." The words were compliant. The tone was not. And everyone within earshot heard the difference. Heard the careful control. Heard the restraint that suggested reserves of strength still untapped. Donovan's jaw clenched. He'd been challenged before, but never like this. Never by someone who should have been afraid of him. Never by someone who stood there with perfect military bearing and eyes that suggested she'd seen things that would break him. "You know what?" His voice took on a mocking edge. "I think we need to settle something here. There's been some confusion about who knows weapons and who just cleans them." He turned to address the crowd that had begun to gather, sensing drama, sensing blood in the water. "Disassembly competition, right now. Specialist Webb versus our maintenance expert here. Let's see who really knows their business." Specialist Elliot Webb stepped forward, a confident smile on his face. 25 years old, certified armorer with 4 years of experience and an expert rating in 3 weapon platforms. This would be easy. This would be instructive. This would put the cleaning lady back in her place. "I'm game if she is." Webb cracked his knuckles theatrically, though I feel like I should warn her I hold the base record. 43 seconds. Murmurs rippled through the assembled personnel. 43 seconds was impressive. Professional level. The kind of speed that came from thousands of repetitions and genuine expertise. Evelyn didn't move from her station, didn't acknowledge the challenge, didn't give Donovan the satisfaction of a response. "What's wrong?" Donovan's voice carried mockery like a weapon sharp and designed to wound. "Scared? Or did you finally realize you're out of your depth?" "I have work to do, Staff Sergeant." Evelyn's voice remained level professional, These weapons need to be ready for the afternoon qualification. Work can wait. This is about respect, about knowing your place. Donovan stepped closer, using his size to intimidate his presence as a physical threat. Unless you want me to tell Colonel Pierce that you're refusing a direct order. It wasn't a direct order. Everyone knew it, but the power dynamic was clear. The threat implicit. Refuse and face consequences. Comply and face humiliation. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Evelyn set down her tools with careful precision, each implement placed exactly where it belonged. Then she looked up at Donovan, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something that made Isaac Grayson, watching from across the yard, straighten to attention. Fine. A space was cleared in the center of the training yard. 2 M4 carbines were placed on a table identical in every way. Standard military issue. The kind of weapon every soldier in the facility could disassemble in their sleep. Webb took his position with the swagger of a man who'd already won, who knew exactly how this would play out. 4 years of daily practice against a cleaning woman who probably barely knew which end the bullets came out of. Evelyn stood opposite, her expression blank. Her stance relaxed, her breathing steady. Waiting. Standard disassembly and reassembly, Donovan announced, loving every moment of this. First one to present a function-checked weapon wins. Ready. Webb nodded, rolling his shoulders, preparing for performance. Evelyn said nothing, just waited. Patient, still. Go. Webb's hands moved with practiced efficiency, the movements of a man who'd performed this task thousands of times. Pins out bolt carrier group, free trigger assembly separated. His fingers flew, muscle memory taking over. 47 seconds. He slapped the charging handle, pointed the weapon at the ground, pulled the trigger. Click. Function check complete. Done. He looked up, triumph on his face. Then he saw where everyone else was looking. Evelyn stood motionless, her weapon already reassembled, already function checked, resting on the table in front of her. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was slow and even. Her hands were empty. Time. Someone asked the word, barely more than a whisper. Isaac checked his watch, though he'd been counting in his head. Old habits from desert operations, where timing meant the difference between extraction and capture. 11.4 seconds. The silence was absolute. Not the silence of shock this time. The silence of witnessing something impossible become real. That's impossible. Webb breathed, his face gone pale. No one can. I've seen instructors who can't. She didn't even look, someone whispered from the crowd. She did the whole thing with her eyes closed. Warrant Officer Jasper Reed pushed through the assembled soldiers, his weathered face intent. He'd flown enough extract missions for Tier 1 operators to recognize what he was seeing. 8 years of watching the best warriors in the world work, and this woman had just demonstrated a level of proficiency that existed in a category all its own. His eyes locked on Evelyn with an intensity that made nearby soldiers step aside. What's your call sign? The question cut through the silence like a blade. Not, what's your name? Or, where'd you learn that? Call sign. The question you asked operators, not maintenance techs. Evelyn opened her eyes, met his gaze without flinching. I'm just a maintenance technician, sir. I've flown extract missions for Tier 1 operators for 8 years. Reed stepped closer, his voice dropping but somehow carrying further. I know what BUDS graduates look like when they handle weapons. I know how they move, how they think, how they exist in the world. He paused, studying her face, searching for confirmation of what he already knew. What is your call sign? I don't have one. The lie was smooth, practiced, utterly unconvincing to anyone who knew what to look for. Isaac pulled Command Sergeant Major Grant aside, speaking in urgent whispers that carried more weight than shouting ever could. That disassembly time, that level of proficiency. Eyes closed, which means muscle memory so deep, she doesn't need visual confirmation. There's only one place that produces operators like that. Grant finished the thought, his voice heavy with realization. You think she's a SEAL? I think she's something. Grant looked across the yard to where Colonel Pierce stood watching his face, betraying nothing. And I think whatever it is, it's classified above our pay grade. He knows. Isaac's voice was flat with certainty. Look at him. Pierce knows exactly who she is. Then why isn't he saying anything? That, Grant said slowly, is the interesting question. Donovan Keller wasn't finished. The humiliation of watching a cleaning lady outperform his hand-picked armorer demanded retribution, demanded some way to restore the natural order of things, to prove that this was a fluke, an anomaly, something that could be explained away and forgotten. He snatched an M9 Beretta from the nearest rack, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber with unnecessary force. Anybody can play with parts when you've memorized the movements. Let's see if you can actually shoot. He thrust the weapon toward Evelyn, his expression savage with the need to reassert dominance. Firing range, 50 yards. Standard qualification course. Staff Sergeant Captain Hugo Brennan began. The training officer, finally sensing that this had gone too far, that lines were being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. What she's already proved, she thinks she's better than everyone. Let's give her a chance to prove it. Donovan's smile was cruel predatory, unless she wants to admit she's just a parts monkey who got lucky. Evelyn looked at the Beretta in his outstretched hand. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there weighing something that only she could see, calculating odds and outcomes in ways that the crowd couldn't understand. I'm not qualified for weapons discharge on this facility, she said finally, her voice carrying a careful neutrality. I'll qualify you. Donovan shoved the weapon into her hands. Right now. Move. The crowd followed, sensing drama, sensing something building toward a conclusion they couldn't quite predict. By the time they reached the pistol range, nearly 60 people had gathered, word spreading through the base like wildfire. Something's happening. Something big. Donovan loaded a fresh magazine, handed it to Evelyn with exaggerated care. 15 rounds, 50 yards. Let's see what you've got. Evelyn approached the firing line with measured steps. She loaded the magazine, chambered around, raised the weapon in a textbook Weaver stance. But something was wrong. Her right hand trembled slightly, a barely perceptible vibration that anyone looking closely could see, the kind of shake that suggested nerves uncertainty, the natural response of someone out of their depth. What's the matter? Garrett Mitchell called out, emboldened by Donovan's presence, by the crowd's anticipation. Scared of a little bang. Evelyn adjusted her grip, steadied her breathing, and fired. The first round hit 6 inches left of the target. The second went high. By the fifth shot, her grouping was scattered across a 2-foot radius, not a single round touching center mass. Laughter erupted from the crowd. Relieved laughter, the natural order restored. The cleaning lady put back in her place. This is priceless. Webb crowed, his earlier humiliation forgotten in the joy of someone else's failure. Fastest disassembly I've ever seen. And she can't hit the broadside of a building. Technician accuracy? Donovan smirked, satisfaction radiating from him like heat. All theory, no practice. Maybe stick to what you know, sweetheart. Garrett was practically dancing with glee. Should have stayed in the kitchen where you belong. But Isaac Grayson wasn't laughing. His eyes had moved past the 50-yard target to the 200-yard marker at the far end of the range. His coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, hitting the ground with a dull thud that went unnoticed in the general mockery. He sat down, his legs suddenly unable to support his weight. Holy God, he breathed. Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Osborne followed his gaze and went pale. 58 years old, Marine Scout sniper instructor, Desert Storm veteran, with more confirmed kills than he'd ever acknowledge. He knew precision when he saw it. He knew the difference between luck and skill, between amateur and master. And what he was looking at made his hands shake. He walked slowly to the 200-yard marker, his boots heavy on the gravel. The crowd's laughter began to die as people noticed his movement, noticed the way he'd stopped, and stared, noticed the expression on his weathered face. Osborne stood there for a long moment studying the target. Then he turned back to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the range with the weight of professional acknowledgement. 5 rounds, 200 yards, Pentagon grouping. He paused, letting that sink in, letting everyone understand what they were really looking at. With iron sights, on a pistol designed for 25-yard maximum accuracy. Another pause, longer this time. I've seen Marine Scout snipers who couldn't make this shot with a rifle. She just did it with a sidearm, to prove a point, without saying a word. The silence that followed was different from before. Not shock, Not embarrassment. Something deeper. The silence of watching reality reorganize itself, of understanding that everything you thought you knew was wrong. She missed, Donovan insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. The certainty was crumbling, replaced by something that looked like fear. She clearly missed the target right in front of her. She hit exactly what she was aiming at. Isaac stepped forward, positioning himself between Donovan and Evelyn. His 62 years of experience suddenly carrying an authority that rank alone couldn't convey. The question is why she bothered to make it look like she missed it first. Evelyn ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, set the weapon down on the bench with careful precision. Her face revealed nothing. No pride, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. I'm done here. She turned to walk back to her station. I have work to do. Hold on. Colonel Nathaniel Pierce descended from the observation platform, his stride purposeful, commanding. The crowd parted before him, like water, before a ship's bow. 64 years of command presence made manifest. Technician Thorne, a word. Evelyn stopped, stood at attention, waited. That was quite a demonstration. Pierce's voice was measured careful, each word chosen with precision. Where did you learn to shoot like that? Practice, sir. Lots of practice. Practice. Pierce let the word hang in the air, testing its weight, finding it insufficient. He turned to where Francis Webb, the civilian contractor, worked at a laptop nearby. Webb, any progress on that file? The contractor looked up, his face troubled. More than troubled. Disturbed. Sir, I've hit a wall. Her file isn't just locked. It's flagged. Any deeper access attempts trigger an automatic notification to... He trailed off, swallowing hard. Sir, I'm not even authorized to know who gets notified. Pierce nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected, as if pieces of a puzzle he'd been working on for 4 years had finally clicked into place. Very well. Carry on, technician. As Evelyn walked away, Pierce caught Isaac's eye and gave an almost imperceptible nod. A silent communication between men who'd spent lifetimes learning to speak without words. Something was happening here, something that went far beyond a simple personality conflict. Something that had been building for 4 years, waiting for exactly the right moment to emerge. And whatever it was about to blow wide open. The afternoon sun had begun its descent when Donovan cornered Evelyn at her workstation. Most personnel had moved to the mess hall for lunch, leaving the armory area relatively deserted. Just a handful of witnesses remained, enough to make what happened next a matter of record, but few enough to embolden a man desperate to restore his shattered pride. You think you're clever, don't you? His voice was low, venomous, the quiet fury of someone who'd lost everything and needed someone to blame. Making me look bad in front of everyone. Evelyn didn't look up from her work. Her hands continued their methodical inspection of firing pins, each movement precise and controlled. I was just defending myself, Staff Sergeant. You were showing off, playing games. He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, the sweat of exertion and fear. But here's the thing about games. I always win. I'm not playing any games. Then what are you playing at? His hand shot out, grabbing the front of her uniform, bunching the fabric in his fist. Who are you really? Where did you learn to shoot like that? Why is your file locked behind clearances I can't access? Let go of me. Evelyn's voice remained level, but something had changed. A hardness entering her tone that hadn't been there before. A warning that most people would have recognized as dangerous. Donovan Keller was not most people. He was a man whose ego had been shattered in front of 83 witnesses, whose authority had been undermined by someone he'd dismissed as beneath him, whose entire identity had been called into question by a cleaning lady with a pistol. Not until you answer my questions. His grip tightened, pulling her slightly off balance. You've been here 4 years. 4 years of acting like you're invisible. And suddenly, you're disarming panicked trainees and shooting like an Olympic champion. Nobody's that good. Nobody. Garrett Mitchell appeared at his shoulder, his expression eager despite the bruises forming on his face from the earlier confrontation. Despite the humiliation of being swept aside like a child, he was still loyal to the man who'd given him purpose and direction. Maybe she's a foreign operative, Garrett suggested, his voice carrying a mocking edge. Planted here to gather intel. Shut up, Garrett. But Donovan's eyes didn't leave Evelyn's face, searching for cracks in her composure, for any sign of weakness he could exploit. I'm going to find out what you're hiding, and when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're a fraud. He shoved her backward with enough force to send her stumbling. Her hip caught the edge of the workbench, and for a fraction of a second, she was off balance, vulnerable. Her shirt pulled tight across her shoulder. The aged fabric stressed beyond its limit by 4 years of daily wear, and the violence of the moment began to give way. And with a sound like tearing paper, the seam split. Time stopped. Because there, exposed on her right shoulder, was a tattoo that every soldier in the United States military would recognize instantly. A golden eagle wings spread wide in flight, clutching a trident in one talon and a flintlock pistol in the other. Surrounded by an anchor, the symbol of naval heritage, and below it, in stark black letters that seemed to burn against her skin, Team 8, the trident, the symbol of the Navy SEALs, the most elite special operations force in the world. The warriors who operated in shadows, whose missions were never acknowledged, whose very existence was often classified. Garrett made a sound like a dying animal, a whimper of recognition and sudden absolute terror. Master Sergeant Isaac Grayson, who had been approaching with questions of his own, stopped dead in his tracks. His hand rose to his forehead in an automatic salute before his conscious mind even registered what he was seeing. "Senior Chief?" The words came out as a breath, as a prayer, as an acknowledgement of something sacred. Command Sergeant Major Elijah Grant had been walking past when the commotion began. Now, he stood frozen, his dark face draining of color as realization dawned like a terrible sunrise. My God! Operation Silent Thunder. The name rippled through the remaining witnesses like an electric current. Operation Silent Thunder. The classified mission that had been whispered about in intelligence circles for 4 years. The operation that was never officially confirmed, never officially denied. The ghost story that operators told in private when they thought no one else was listening. Colonel Pierce emerged from his office at the sound of Isaac's raised voice. He took in the scene with a single glance. Evelyn's torn shirt, the exposed tattoo, the stunned faces, and something shifted in his expression. Authority settled over him like a mantle, transforming him from base commander to something more. Something that spoke of classified briefings and operations that existed only in sealed files. Senior Chief Evelyn Thorne. His voice carried across the training yard, commanding attention from every person within earshot. Call sign Wraith, SEAL Team 8. The words fell like hammer blows, each one striking with the weight of absolute truth. 9 combat deployments, 52 confirmed operations. Around them, soldiers were beginning to emerge from buildings, drawn by the commotion, by the sound of Pierce's voice, carrying across the base with unusual intensity. Within minutes, every person on the training complex would know, would hear, would understand. Bronze Star with Valor, 3 Purple Hearts. Pierce's voice resonated with the weight of history, of sacrifice, of service, that most people couldn't imagine. Operation Silent Thunder, Kandahar, Afghanistan, April 2019. The assembled crowd had swollen to over 50, now more, arriving every second, drawn by the magnetic pull of revelation. She held a defensive position for 13 hours under continuous enemy fire. With a collapsed lung, eliminated 23 hostile combatants, saved 17 American lives. Corporal Madison Reeves, a female trainee who'd been watching Evelyn all morning with fascination, had tears streaming down her face. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. "God, I knew she was something." Corporal Jason Rivera. The young soldier Evelyn had helped that morning was openly weeping. His hands shook, but not from fear this time, from overwhelming emotion, from the sudden understanding of who had helped him, who had seen his pain and recognized it. "She knew about my PTSD," he managed through tears. "She understood because she lived it." Pierce continued, his voice cutting through the gathering crowd like a blade through water. "The only reason you haven't heard her name is because everything about that operation is classified above your clearance level, above my clearance level." He paused, letting that sink in. letting everyone understand the weight of what they were witnessing. Senior Chief Thorne is a ghost, an asset whose very existence is compartmentalized beyond normal channels. Gunnery Sergeant Tobias Osborne snapped to attention and rendered a parade ground perfect salute. His weathered face carried an expression of profound respect. Senior Chief. His voice carried across the yard, and one by one, every soldier in sight followed suit. Trainees, instructors, officers, support staff. They rose to their feet and saluted the small woman standing alone by the workbench, her torn shirt exposing the symbol of her silent sacrifice. Captain Hugo Brennan stepped forward, his face gray with shame. The training officer, who had dismissed her with a glance, now stood at rigid attention, saluting with a precision that suggested desperation. Senior Chief, I owe you an apology. His voice cracked, the professional veneer shattering. I failed in my duty as an officer. I prioritized convenience over justice. There is no excuse. Evelyn returned the salute with military precision. Her face still revealed nothing, but Isaac thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Something softer, something that looked like relief. There's no need for apologies, Captain, she said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. But there is need for change. Brennan nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, Senior Chief, there is. Yes, sir. Specialist Elliot Webb had fallen to his knees in the sand, his face cycling through colors like a stoplight. I challenged a SEAL to a disassembly competition, he said to no one in particular, his voice hollow with shock. I challenged a SEAL. I am the stupidest person alive. Fiona Ashford pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. When she reached Evelyn, she didn't salute, didn't stand at attention. She just wrapped her arms around the smaller woman and held on. I knew, Fiona whispered, her voice thick with emotion. God help me. I knew there was something special about you. Evelyn returned the embrace, and for the first time since the confrontation began, her composure cracked slightly, not breaking but bending, showing the human being beneath the warrior's mask. You were kind to me when you didn't have to be, Fiona. That means more than you know. Garrett Mitchell sat in the sand where he'd fallen, rocking slightly, his face blank with shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I didn't know. Tears began streaming down his face, the reality of what he'd done, crashing over him like a wave. I swear to God, I didn't know. He couldn't finish. The weight of his actions, the magnitude of his mistakes, the understanding of how close he'd come to something unforgivable, it was all too much. And Donovan Keller stood where he had been standing when he'd grabbed Evelyn's shirt. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His hand was still extended, frozen in the moment of his final mistake. His face had gone the color of old ash, and his eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. Pierce approached him slowly, deliberately, each step measured and final. Staff Sergeant Keller. The colonel's voice was soft, but it carried. Everyone heard. Everyone would remember. You just assaulted a decorated Special Operations veteran, a Bronze Star recipient, a Purple Heart holder 3 times over. Donovan's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His hand began to tremble. You questioned her competence, her knowledge, her right to be here. Pierce stepped closer until he was inches from Donovan's face. You had the audacity, the sheer arrogance to tell a woman who has eliminated more enemy combatants than you've ever seen in photographs to stay in her lane. A sound escaped Donovan's throat. It might have been a whimper. It might have been the last gasp of dying pride. Consider your career over. Pierce turned away, the gesture itself a form of dismissal. MPs, please escort Staff Sergeant Keller to the detention facility pending court-martial proceedings. 2 military police officers materialized from the crowd, their faces carefully neutral as they took positions on either side of the stunned ranger. Donovan's legs seemed to fail him, and the MPs had to support most of his weight as they led him away. His feet dragged in the sand, leaving twin trails behind him, like the wake of something sinking. Garrett was next. The young soldier was still sitting when the MPs approached his face, streaked with tears, his body shaking with the enormity of understanding. Private First Class Mitchell, You are under arrest for assault on a senior NCO and conspiracy to commit assault. I didn't know. The words tumbled out in a panicked rush, desperate and broken. I didn't know who she was. I swear, I didn't know that, Evelyn said quietly, her voice cutting through Garrett's panic, with surgical precision, is precisely the problem. Everyone turned to look at her. The small woman with the torn shirt and the revealed tattoo and the eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. You treated me the way you did because you thought I was nobody. She looked at Garrett, then at the gathered soldiers, her voice calm, measured, but carrying to every corner of the silent yard. Because you thought I was beneath you. She paused, letting the words sink in, letting everyone feel their weight. Your behavior was the problem, and it would have been just as wrong if I actually was just a maintenance technician. The assembled personnel went absolutely still. Some fundamental truth had just been spoken, and everyone present understood its importance in ways they couldn't quite articulate. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's rank or status. Evelyn's gaze swept across the crowd, meeting eyes holding them. Every person on this base, every technician, every cook, every clerk, they all volunteered to serve their country. They all deserve dignity. Madison Reeves wiped her eyes and nodded, standing straighter, understanding something fundamental about service, about respect, about what it meant to wear the uniform. Jason Rivera straightened his shoulders, his hands steady for the first time all day, understanding that weakness wasn't something to hide, but something to acknowledge and overcome. Fiona Ashford stood beside Evelyn, her chin raised, her posture proud, understanding that kindness wasn't weakness, and that seeing people for who they really were was the most important skill anyone could possess. As the MPs led Garrett away, the young man looked back one last time. His face was a mask of grief and understanding of someone who'd learned the hardest lesson of his life and would carry it forever. The training yard slowly emptied as personnel returned to their duties, their worldviews fundamentally altered. Conversations would happen in barracks that night. Questions would be asked, stories would be shared, and everyone who'd witnessed what happened would carry it with them as a reminder that the people we dismiss, the ones we overlook, the ones we think don't matter, they might be the most important people of all. Evelyn returned to her workstation as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. The weapons still needed maintenance. The trainees still needed equipment. Her job, whatever name it carried in the personnel database, hadn't changed. But everything else had. The torn shirt hung awkwardly on her shoulder, the tattoo still visible to anyone who looked. She made no effort to cover it. The secret was out. The ghost had been revealed. 4 years of invisibility ended by a single moment of violence from a man who couldn't accept being wrong. And as the day faded into evening, as the base settled into its nighttime routine, Master Sergeant Isaac Grayson found her there. Still working, still methodical, still the same person she'd been that morning, except now, everyone knew what he'd suspected all along. Senior Chief. He stood at a respectful distance, his weathered face carrying an expression of profound respect. Permission to speak freely. Granted, Master Sergeant. I served as SEAL liaison during Desert Storm, Coronado 91 and 92. I thought I'd seen everything they could do, every level of excellence they could achieve. He paused, choosing his words carefully. What you did today in that pit with those 2 idiots, you weren't fighting them. You were teaching them. Every move you made was designed to control without injuring, to dominate without destroying. That's not combat technique. That's philosophy made manifest. Evelyn set down the rifle she'd been inspecting, meeting his eyes across the fading light. They weren't enemies, Master Sergeant. They were just fools. And fools deserve education, not elimination. Isaac smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face into something almost paternal. Your father would be proud. Something flickered in Evelyn's expression. Pain, memory loss, all compressed into a single moment of vulnerability. You knew my father, Brigadier General Marcus Thorne. Cold War operations, classified missions in Eastern Europe, 85 to 87. He taught me that real warriors don't just win battles. They win hearts and minds. They serve something bigger than themselves. Evelyn's hands had stopped moving her attention, completely focused on the older man before her. He died when I was 7. Classified mission. They never told us where or how, just that he was a hero. He was. Isaac stepped closer, his voice dropping to something private, something meant only for her. And so are you. What you did today, showing restraint, when you could have destroyed them, teaching, when you could have punished. That's the legacy he left you. That's what makes you more than just an operator. They stood together in the gathering darkness, two warriors separated by decades, but united by understanding. By the knowledge that real strength wasn't about what you could do to others, but what you chose not to do. Colonel Pierce is going to offer you an instructor position, Isaac said finally. When he does take it, these kids need to see what you represent. They need to learn what real warriors look like. I'll think about it, Master Sergeant. That's all I ask. As Isaac walked away, Evelyn pulled out something from her pocket. A challenge coin that Colonel Pierce had given her earlier, before everything changed. She hadn't really examined it in the chaos of the day, but now turning it over in her fingers, she noticed something for the first time. On the reverse side, almost hidden in the intricate design, was a name. Benjamin Sterling. Hawk. Her spotter. Her teammate. Her friend. The man who had covered her retreat in Kandahar, who had drawn fire while she evacuated the wounded, who had fallen in a hail of bullets she'd been unable to prevent. The man she'd carried in her heart, like a stone for 4 years. A weight that never lessened. A guilt that never eased. Pierce had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to give her this coin. Enough to let her find her own way to this moment. Enough to trust that when the time came, she would make the right choice. Evelyn looked across the base at the training yards where everything had changed. At the buildings full of soldiers who now knew her secret. At the sky darkening with the promise of night. 4 years ago, she had walked away from the life of a warrior, broken in body and spirit, carrying the weight of everyone she couldn't save, everyone she'd left behind. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey back. But tonight, she simply stood in the darkness, holding the coin that carried her lost friend's name, and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Hope, fragile and tentative, but hope nonetheless. Because sometimes the dead didn't stay dead. Sometimes ghosts could come back. And sometimes the missions you thought were finished were just beginning. The easy days were over. They always had been. But real warriors didn't need easy. They just needed purpose. And Evelyn Thorne had just found hers again. The secure phone in Colonel Pierce's office had been ringing for 30 minutes. The red light blinked with mechanical persistence, each pulse a demand for attention that couldn't be ignored. Level 7 encryption. The kind of security classification that existed in a realm beyond normal military operations, in spaces where decisions were made that would never appear in official records. Pierce stood at his window, watching the last light fade from the training yard, where Evelyn Thorne's secret had been laid bare just hours ago. His weathered hand rested on the glass fingers splayed against the cool surface as if he could somehow touch the weight of what was coming. He'd known this moment would arrive eventually. Had known it from the day Evelyn first appeared at Fort Bragg 4 years ago, carrying wounds that went deeper than flesh seeking refuge in the kind of invisibility that only the truly broken understood. He'd protected her, cover, redirected inquiries, ensured that her file remained locked behind clearances that would stop casual curiosity dead in its tracks. But the phone kept ringing, and some calls couldn't be ignored forever. "Sir?" The voice came from behind him. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her torn uniform replaced by fresh fatigues, the SEAL trident now visible on her shoulder, like a declaration of war. "You wanted to see me." Pierce turned from the window, his pale blue eyes carrying the weight of 6 decades of secrets. "That phone has been ringing since the moment your tattoo was exposed. Level 7 encryption. I've only seen that twice before in my career." He paused, letting the implications settle between them. Both times it concerned operations that officially don't exist. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition, understanding, perhaps even resignation. Answer it, Pierce said quietly. I'll give you privacy. Sir, whatever this is about, Senior Chief? His voice carried the gentle firmness of a man who'd given orders in places where hesitation meant death. I suspect I already know what this is, and I suspect you need to hear it. He moved toward the door, pausing beside her. For just a moment, his hand rested on her shoulder, a gesture that transcended rank and protocol. Thank you for today, for everything, for being exactly who you are when it would have been easier to be anyone else. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like finality. Evelyn stood alone in the office, staring at the blinking red light. 4 years. 4 years of peace, fragile and temporary, but peace nonetheless. 4 years of being nobody, of cleaning weapons and maintaining equipment and existing in spaces where the past couldn't find her. The light blinked, insistent, demanding. She picked up the receiver. This is Thorne. The voice that answered was female, heavily modulated to the point of being mechanical. But something in the cadence was familiar. Something that triggered memories she'd tried to bury. Wraith, welcome back. 3 words. Simple. Direct. But they carried the weight of recognition of shared history of operations that existed only in sealed files and the nightmares of those who'd survived them. Who is this? A friend, an old colleague. It doesn't matter. A pause carefully calculated. We've been watching your progress. The Wounded Warrior program. The maintenance work. The incident today. Evelyn's grip tightened on the receiver. You've been surveilling me. We've been waiting for you. There's a difference. We have a mission, Wraith, one that requires your specific skill set, your particular history, your unique connection to an asset we've been tracking for 4 years. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. 4 years. The same amount of time Evelyn had been hiding at Fort Bragg. The same amount of time she'd been carrying a weight she couldn't name. I'm retired. Medical discharge. Even if it concerns Hawk. The name hit her like a physical blow. For a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The office around her seemed to tilt, reality shifting on an axis that had suddenly lost its center. Her free hand reached out, finding the edge of Pierce's desk, gripping it hard enough that her knuckles went white. Hawk is dead. The words came out rough, scraped raw, by 4 years of grief. KIA Kandahar. I saw him fall. You saw him fall. You assumed the worst. Everyone did. The voice softened slightly, taking on an almost gentle quality. But assumptions aren't facts, Wraith, and sometimes the dead don't stay buried. Evelyn sank into Pierce's chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. Images flooded her mind, unbidden and overwhelming. The compound in Kandahar. Smoke and fire and the sound of automatic weapons tearing the air apart. Hawk's voice on the radio steady even as everything collapsed around them. Get them out, Wraith. That's an order. The easy days are over. Now go. She'd watched from the extraction point as the building came down. Watched as fire and smoke swallowed everything. Watched as the place where her spotter, her teammate, her friend had been making his last stand simply ceased to exist. They'd declared him KIA. Body never recovered. Another ghost added to the long list of warriors who disappeared into the dark places of the world and never came home. That's impossible, she managed finally. We have satellite imagery, signal intercepts, HUMINT from assets on the ground. A pause. Lieutenant Benjamin Sterling is alive, Wraith, confirmed as of 72 hours ago. He's been held in a black site facility on the Syria-Iraq border for 4 years. The room spun. Evelyn's training kicked in automatically, forcing her to breathe, to center herself, to process information, even as her emotional core threatened to fragment. Why are you telling me this? Because we're mounting a recovery operation, and we want you on the team. I haven't agreed to anything. 6 months ago, one of our assets managed to make brief contact with the prisoner. She had approximately 90 seconds before guards returned. The voice paused, letting the moment build. Sterling gave her a message to deliver. He said, "Tell Wraith the easy days are over." The phrase hit her harder than the name had. Their code. The words they'd used during training, during deployments, during the moments when things got hard and staying easy would have meant death. A signal between warriors who understood that survival sometimes required becoming something harder than the circumstances trying to kill you. He knew we'd come for him, Evelyn whispered. He knew you'd come for him. You were his teammate, his friend, the person he trusted more than anyone else in the world. The voice took on an edge of urgency. He's been holding on to hope for 4 years because he believed in you. Evelyn closed her eyes, fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. 4 years of guilt. 4 years of carrying his death like a stone in her chest. 4 years of wondering if she could have done something different, made some other choice, found some way to bring him home. And now this. The possibility of redemption, wrapped in mystery and delivered by a voice she didn't recognize, but somehow knew was telling the truth. You could hear truth in certain silences, in the spaces between words where lies couldn't hide. Brief me. Her voice was steady, now clear as purpose. I want to know everything. Compound layout, guard rotations, entry and exit points, extraction protocols, everything. A sound that might have been approval came through the line. Welcome back, Wraith. Briefing is at 0500 tomorrow. Secure facility off base. Transportation will pick you up at 0430. Understood. And Wraith, this operation doesn't exist. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry coming. No extraction. No acknowledgement that we were ever there. Black Ops. Evelyn had run enough of them to know the drill. Plausible deniability. Need-to-know basis. Expendable assets pursuing objectives that couldn't be officially sanctioned. When has it ever been any different? The line went dead. Evelyn sat in the darkness of Pierce's office, the phone still pressed to her ear. Her mind a battlefield of warring emotions. Hope and fear. Purpose and doubt. The past she'd tried to escape, and the future rushing toward her like a freight train. Through the window, she could see the training yard where her secret had been exposed. Somewhere down there, Fiona was probably starting her evening shift. Madison was probably reviewing the day's training. Jason was probably fighting his demons with the courage of a soldier who refused to surrender. And Donovan Keller was probably sitting in a cell, contemplating the ruins of his career, understanding, perhaps for the first time, that the woman he'd tried to break had been stronger than him all along. But Evelyn's thoughts were elsewhere. On a man she'd thought dead. On a promise she'd thought broken. On a mission that would either bring him home or ensure she joined him in whatever dark place he'd been held for 4 years. She pulled out the challenge coin Pierce had given her. In the dim light from the window, she could just make out the name engraved on the reverse side. Benjamin Sterling, Hawk. Pierce had known, maybe not everything, but enough. Enough to give her this coin months ago. Enough to prepare her for this moment, even if she hadn't understood what was coming. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Come in. Master Sergeant Isaac Grayson entered, his weathered face creased with concern. He carried 2 cups of coffee steam, rising in the cool evening air. Figured you might need this. He set 1 cup on the desk, settling into the chair across from her with the comfortable ease of a man who'd earned the right to be informal with superior ranks. How did you know I was here? 62 years of learning to read situations. Isaac took a sip of his coffee, his gray eyes studying her face. And the fact that Colonel Pierce just told me you'd be leaving soon. Asked me to check in on you. Evelyn wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. Grounding. Real. They found him, Isaac. They found Hawk. I know. Pierce told me that much. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something private. I also know you're going after him. And I know that look in your eyes. I've seen it before in operators preparing for missions they might not come back from. He's alive. He's been waiting for 4 years. I'm not here to talk you out of it. Isaac set down his cup with deliberate care. I'm here to tell you something you need to hear before you go. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tactical compass, old-worn, the kind that had seen decades of use and carried the weight of history in every scratch and dent. Desert Storm, 1991. I was 33 years old, attached to SEAL teams for reconnaissance operations. We got pinned down outside Basra, surrounded on 3 sides, communication shot to hell. He turned the compass over in his weathered hands. This compass got me through. Every time I thought we were lost, every time I was sure we'd never make it out, I'd check this bearing. and it never failed. He pressed it into Evelyn's hand, closing her fingers around it. It's guided me through 100 missions, Senior Chief. Brought me home every single time. Now I'm passing it to you. Evelyn looked down at the compass, seeing the inscription etched into the back. Always find your way home. Desert Storm 91. Isaac, I can't. Yes, you can, and you will. His voice carried the absolute certainty of a man who'd seen too much to doubt his own judgment. Bring it back. Bring yourself back. These kids need to see what you represent. They need teachers who've been through the fire and chosen to serve anyway. What if I can't save him? Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful in the dim light. I worked with your father, Brigadier General Marcus Thorne. Cold War operations, Eastern Europe, mid-'80s. Classified missions that officially never happened. Evelyn's breath caught. You knew my father? I did. He was one of the finest officers I ever served with. Brilliant tactician, fearless leader. But more than that, he understood something that most warriors never learn. What's that? That success isn't measured in kills or medals or operations completed. It's measured in the people you bring home, the lives you save, the difference you make in a world that's mostly darkness. Isaac leaned back, his eyes distant with memory. Your father died on a classified mission in 1987. You were 7 years old. What they didn't tell you, what they couldn't tell you because it was sealed, is that he died covering the retreat of 8 operators. He could have extracted. He had the window, but he stayed behind to make sure everyone else got out. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face, now silent and unstoppable. He made a choice that day, to sacrifice himself so others could live. That's what warriors do, Evelyn. We don't quit even when the odds say we should. We don't abandon our people even when staying means dying. He stood, moving toward the door, then paused. You're his daughter in every way that matters. You have his courage, his skill, his understanding of what it means to serve. Whatever happens on this mission, whatever choices you have to make, trust that. Trust the legacy he gave you. Thank you, Isaac. Thank me by coming back. And when you do, we'll talk about that instructor position Pierce is going to offer you. After he left, Evelyn sat alone, with her coffee and the compass and the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Outside, the base had settled into its nighttime rhythm. Guard changes, patrol routes, the familiar sounds of a military installation preparing for sleep. But Evelyn wouldn't sleep tonight. She had preparations to make, equipment to gather, a mission to plan, and a promise to keep. She rose from Pierce's chair and made her way through the darkened corridors of the command building. Her footsteps echoed on the tile floors, each step carrying her further from the person she'd been that morning and closer to the warrior she'd tried to leave behind. Her quarters were small, Spartan, chosen specifically for their anonymity. A bunk, a locker, a small bathroom with water pressure that felt like luxury after 4 years of base housing. But hidden in the back of her closet, behind uniforms that smelled of gun oil and sweat, was something else. A go bag, black tactical pack. Waterproof, reinforced, designed to carry everything an operator might need for a mission that existed in the space between official sanction and absolute deniability. She hadn't opened it in 4 years. Hadn't needed to. The person who'd packed this bag, who'd prepared for contingencies and planned for worst-case scenarios, that person had died on a rooftop in Kandahar, with a bullet in her lung and the screams of dying men in her ears. Or so she'd thought. Evelyn pulled the bag from its hiding place and set it on her bunk. The zipper still moved smoothly, well-maintained, despite years of disuse. Inside, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Medical kit, combat-grade tourniquet, hemostatic agents, pressure bandages, the tools for keeping people alive when death was determined to claim them. Emergency rations, MREs stripped of unnecessary packaging, compressed to minimum volume, capable of sustaining an operator for days in hostile territory. False identification. 3 different countries, 3 different names, 3 different lives that existed only on paper and in the databases of intelligence agencies that didn't officially exist. And at the bottom, wrapped in oiled cloth, her personal sidearm. A modified Glock 19 that had accompanied her on 9 deployments, every mission, every operation where death was a possibility, and survival was earned through skill and luck in equal measure. She unwrapped the weapon slowly, reverently. The metal was cool against her palms, familiar in ways that transcended conscious thought. This pistol had saved her life more times than she could count, had taken others when there was no choice left, had been the last line of defense between her team and oblivion on more occasions than she wanted to remember. Her fingers moved automatically, field stripping the weapon, checking each component with the methodical precision of someone for whom this ritual was as natural as breathing. Slide, barrel, recoil spring, frame, everything in perfect condition, maintained by instinct, even during years of disuse. She reassembled the Glock, loaded 3 magazines with practiced efficiency, secured everything in the go bag, according to a pattern burned into muscle memory through countless iterations. A knock at her door interrupted her preparations. "It's open?" Fiona Ashford entered, her red hair catching the harsh fluorescent light. She carried a small bag, her expression a mixture of concern and determination. "Heard you're leaving?" "Word travels fast. It always does." Fiona set the bag on the bunk beside Evelyn. "I brought you something. Figured you might need it." Inside were sandwiches, energy bars, a thermos of coffee. Simple things. Practical things. The kind of care that spoke louder than grand gestures. "Thank you, Fiona. I'm not going to ask where you're going or what you're doing." Fiona sat on the edge of the bunk, her voice soft. "But I need to ask you something else. Go ahead. Why maintenance? After everything you'd done, all the places you'd been, all the people you'd saved, why come here and clean weapons?" Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. It deserved an honest answer. "My father wrote letters from his deployments. I found them after he died, tucked away in a box my mother kept. In one of them he wrote, 'True warriors serve in peace, not just war. The gun that never fires, because it's properly maintained, saves as many lives as the one that fires true when needed.'" She picked up one of Fiona's sandwiches, not because she was hungry, but because the gesture felt right. "I wanted to honor that, to serve without killing, to keep people safe not through violence but through preparation. Every weapon I maintained, every rifle I checked, I knew I was protecting someone, maybe saving their life when the moment came that they needed their equipment to function perfectly." Fiona wiped her eyes. "That's beautiful and incredibly sad. Most true things are." They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 women from different worlds connected by a simple act of human kindness that transcended rank and role and expectation. "When you come back," Fiona said finally, "and you will come back, I want you to teach me. Whatever you know. However you became who you are. I want to learn." Evelyn smiled, the expression carrying warmth that had been absent from her face for years. "I'd like that." After Fiona left, Evelyn continued her preparations. She checked her tactical gear, verified her equipment, ensured that every item in her go bag was positioned exactly where instinct would reach for it in moments of crisis. But her mind was elsewhere, on a compound in hostile territory, on a man who'd been waiting 4 years for rescue, on a mission that would either end in redemption or add one more ghost to the collection she already carried. At 0200, she made her way to the base chapel, small, non-denominational, designed to serve the spiritual needs of soldiers from every faith and background. It was empty at this hour, just rows of pews and an altar lit by a single candle. Evelyn knelt in the front row, not because she was particularly religious, but because some rituals transcended belief. Because warriors throughout history had sought solace in quiet places before walking into darkness. Because prayer, whether to God or fate or the universe itself, was a way of acknowledging that some things were beyond human control. "I don't know if you're listening," she whispered to the empty space. "I don't know if my father is somewhere listening either. But if you are, if he is, I need you to know something." Her hands gripped the pew in front of her knuckles, white with tension. "I left Hawk behind once. I watched him fall, and I couldn't save him. That failure has lived in my chest, like a tumor, for 4 years. It's colored everything, shaped every choice, defined who I became after Kandahar." Tears fell freely now, splashing onto the worn wood. Tomorrow I get a chance to make it right, to bring him home, to prove that leaving him wasn't the end, just a pause, a detour on a road that always led back to this moment. She wiped her eyes, steadied her breathing. If I don't make it back, I want someone to know that I tried, that I didn't give up, that I honored the legacy my father left me by choosing service over safety, by picking people over self-preservation. The candle flickered. A draft, nothing more. But in that moment, it felt like acknowledgement, like something beyond herself was bearing witness to the vow she was making. The easy days are over. They always were. But warriors don't need easy. We just need purpose. She stood, feeling something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly, but acceptance. The understanding that whatever came next, she would face it with the full measure of her training, her experience, her will. At 0400, she made one final stop. The armory where her secret had been revealed, where everything had changed. The space was empty now, weapons secured, for the night workstations cleaned and organized for the next day's operations. She approached the maintenance bench where she'd spent 4 years of her life, ran her fingers across the surface, feeling the familiar texture of metal and oil and purpose. This place had been her sanctuary, her hiding spot. The space where she could serve without the weight of command, where she could protect without the burden of command decisions. But that chapter was closing. Whatever happened in the next 72 hours, she wouldn't be coming back to this bench as the person who'd left it. Either she'd return as Senior Chief Evelyn Thorne instructor and mentor, helping build the next generation of warriors, or she wouldn't return at all. In the corner, on a shelf she'd claimed as her own, sat a rifle. Not military issue, not part of the regular inventory. This was Benjamin Sterling's personal weapon, the one he'd carried on training exercises, the one she'd maintained religiously for 4 years as a memorial to a man she'd thought lost. She'd cleaned it weekly, checked every component, kept it in perfect condition, as if someday he might walk through the door and need it again. Now that seemed less like ritual and more like prophecy. Evelyn picked up the rifle, feeling its familiar weight. She field stripped it one last time, checking each part with the loving attention of someone preparing a sacred object. Then she reassembled it, loaded a magazine, and secured it in a carrying case. When Hawk came home, he'd come home to a weapon that had been waiting for him. That had been maintained with the kind of care that spoke louder than words. That proved someone had never stopped believing. At 0415, Corporal Jason Rivera found her there. The young soldier who'd been trembling on the firing line that morning, who'd been drowning in PTSD until Evelyn had thrown him a lifeline disguised as shooting instruction. Senior Chief? He stood in the doorway, uncertain, his hands steadier than they'd been 12 hours ago, but still showing the faint tremor of someone fighting invisible demons. I heard you were leaving. Just for a little while, Corporal. I wanted to thank you for today, for seeing me when everyone else just saw a problem. Evelyn set down the rifle case and turned to face him fully, giving him the respect of her complete attention. You're not a problem, Jason. You're a warrior dealing with wounds that most people never see. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. My father had the same tremors when he came back from Iraq. Second deployment 2007. He never talked about it, never got help, just drank until the shaking stopped. Jason's voice cracked. He killed himself when I was 16. I've been terrified I'd end up the same way. Your father did the best he could with what he knew, but you have something he didn't. You have people who understand, who've been where you are, who can help you find a path through the darkness. She moved closer, her voice dropping to something gentle. The trembling isn't weakness, it's your body remembering how to survive. The nightmares aren't failure. They're your mind processing trauma so you can move forward. All of it is proof that you're still fighting. And as long as you're fighting, you haven't lost. Jason wiped his eyes. How do you cope? After everything you've seen, everything you've done, how do you keep going? I serve. Even when I'm scared. Even when it hurts. Even when every instinct says to hide. Because the people I serve, the ones I protect, they're worth it. She placed a hand on his shoulder. You are worth it, Jason. Your life matters. Your service matters. And when I get back, we're going to work together to make sure you have the tools you need to keep fighting, not against enemies, but for yourself, for your future, for the person you're meant to become. Yes, Senior Chief. Thank you. After he left, Evelyn stood alone in the armory one last time, memorizing the space, honoring what it had meant to her. Then she picked up Hawk's rifle case and her go bag and walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. A black SUV with tinted windows was waiting at the designated pickup point. The rear door opened, from inside a silent invitation. Evelyn climbed in, without hesitation, the door closing behind her, with the solid thunk of armored plating. The vehicle accelerated into the night. Inside, 2 men occupied the front seats. Both wore civilian clothes, but their bearing marked them as operators. The way they sat, the way they scanned the environment even while driving, the way they existed in constant readiness. Neither introduced themselves. Neither seemed inclined to small talk. Evelyn was fine with that. She had enough to think about without adding forced conversation to the mix. The drive took 40 minutes, winding through back roads and secure checkpoints until they reached an unremarkable building on the outskirts of Fort Bragg. Chain link fence, concrete walls, a single guard station manned by soldiers who checked credentials with unusual thoroughness. Inside the building, transformed into something else entirely. State-of-the-art communications equipment lined the walls. Digital displays showed satellite imagery of terrain Evelyn recognized immediately. The Syria-Iraq border, her old hunting ground, the place where she'd left pieces of herself that could never be recovered. 3 people waited in the briefing room. A man stood at the center, his back turned, studying a tactical display with focused intensity. Tall, athletic, with close-cropped gray hair and the posture of someone accustomed to command. When he turned, Evelyn saw eyes that had seen too much, served too much, carried too much. Eyes that recognized the same in others. Wraith. The man's voice carried authority without arrogance. Thank you for coming. You can call me Shepard. It's not my name, but it will do. Evelyn shook his hand, noting the strength in his grip, the scars on his knuckles that spoke of violence survived. Commander Victor Brennan, former Delta Force, the kind of operator who'd spent decades in dark places doing things that would never be acknowledged. You're the one who called? I am. Shepard gestured to the tactical display, where the compound layout was rendered in precise detail. Let me introduce you to your team. 2 men stood near the communications station. Both carried themselves with the controlled readiness of operators who'd spent years in dark places. Both had eyes that tracked movement with unconscious precision. This is Nomad, a man in his late 30s with a Scottish accent and features that suggested Highland ancestry, stepped forward. Lieutenant Callum Drummond, formerly Delta Force, explosives specialist. If it needs to blow up, he's your man. Nomad nodded his pale eyes, assessing Evelyn with professional interest. Heard about you, Wraith. Desert Storm guys still tell stories. Don't believe everything you hear. Wouldn't dream of it. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. And this is Echo. A man in his mid-30s with an Irish accent extended his hand. Sergeant Declan Quinn, formerly DevGru, communications and infiltration specialist. Doors that don't want to open tend to change their minds around him. Evelyn shook his hand, noting the way he moved. Economical, precise. The mark of someone who'd learned that wasted motion could mean death. Senior Chief, honored to work with you. 4 operators for a rescue operation in hostile territory. Evelyn looked at Shepard, calculating odds and outcomes. Small team. Minimal footprint, maximum deniability. Shepard's expression was neutral professional. This operation doesn't exist, Wraith. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry coming. No extraction, no acknowledgement that we were ever there. Black Ops. The blackest. Which brings me to an important point. Shepard pulled up a file on the display showing Evelyn's service record, or rather the parts of it that existed beyond classified SEALs. Why you? Why not someone on active duty? Evelyn had been wondering the same thing since the phone call. Because Hawk asked for you, specifically, by name. The words hit like a physical blow. Evelyn's hands clenched at her sides, her breathing carefully controlled. When, 6 months ago, Our asset managed brief contact with the prisoner. She had approximately 90 seconds before guards returned. Shepard pulled up surveillance photos taken through a grimy window. Hawk's face, thinner bearded, marked by captivity, but alive. Undeniably alive. He gave her a message to deliver. He said, "Tell Wraith I'm still here. Tell her the easy days are over." Evelyn closed her eyes, fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her professional composure. Their code, the phrase they'd used during training, during deployments, during the moments when things got hard and staying easy would have meant death. A signal between warriors who understood that survival sometimes required becoming something harder than the circumstances trying to kill you. "He knew we'd come for him," she whispered. "He knew you'd come for him." Shepard's voice softened slightly. "You were his teammate, his friend. He held on to hope because he believed in you." Evelyn opened her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was steady as steel. "Brief me on the compound layout, guard rotations, entry, and exit points. I want to know everything." Shepard smiled, the expression transforming his severe features into something almost warm. "Welcome back, Wraith." The briefing lasted 2 hours. Evelyn absorbed every detail with the focus of an operator preparing for combat. Guard schedules down to the minute. Patrol patterns memorized with the precision of someone whose life would depend on being exactly where she needed to be, exactly when she needed to be there. Structural weaknesses identified and cataloged. Emergency protocols understood and planned for. By the time Shepard finished, Evelyn had memorized the compound layout as thoroughly as she knew her own quarters, could close her eyes and walk through it in her mind, visualizing every turn, every door, every window, every angle that could conceal a threat or provide an opportunity. The plan was simple. All good plans were simple. Complexity was the enemy of execution, and execution was everything. Insert via modified Black Hawk helicopter at remote landing zone 12 kilometers from target. Approach on foot under cover of darkness, using terrain to mask movement. Breach compound at 0200 local time, when guard rotation left a 90-second window of vulnerability. Extract Hawk exfil to pickup point before dawn brought visibility that would make concealment impossible. Simple, clean. 1,000 things that could go wrong hidden beneath apparent simplicity. "Any questions?" Shepard asked. Evelyn had dozens, but only one that mattered. "When do we leave?" "Transport departs at 1800 tonight. You'll have approximately 12 hours to rest and prepare. I strongly suggest you use that time to sleep. You're no good to anyone exhausted." Evelyn nodded, recognizing the wisdom, even as her mind raced with everything that needed to be done. Everything that could go wrong. Everything she needed to prepare for. "There are quarters in the East Wing," Shepard continued. "Shower, sleep, eat. Your gear will be ready when you wake." As Evelyn moved toward the door, Shepard's voice stopped her. "Wraith, one more thing." She turned back. "I'm glad you're on this mission. Hawk couldn't ask for a better guardian angel." Evelyn met his eyes, seeing something in them that looked like respect mixed with concern. "I failed him once. I won't fail him again." The quarters were sparse and functional. Military efficiency stripped of comfort or personality. A bunk, a locker, a small bathroom with water pressure that felt like luxury after years of base housing. Evelyn showered, washing away the residue of her old life, preparing herself mentally for what came next. The water was hot, almost too hot, but she welcomed the slight pain. It kept her grounded, kept her present, kept her from getting lost in the memories of Kandahar that threatened to overwhelm her. When she emerged, she found her tactical gear laid out on the bunk. Black fatigues, body armor, load-bearing vest with ammunition, medical supplies, communications equipment. Each item examined, verified, secured with methodical precision. Her modified Glock went into its holster riding on her thigh, where muscle memory would find it without conscious thought. Extra magazines distributed according to a pattern she'd developed over 9 deployments balanced for weight and accessibility. Combat knives secured at her back, angled for a cross-draw that would clear the sheath in under half a second. She should sleep. Shepard was right about that. Fatigue killed operators as surely as bullets, and she needed to be sharp for what was coming. but sleep felt impossible. Her mind was too active, too full of plans and contingencies and memories that wouldn't stop replaying. So instead, she sat on the edge of the bunk and pulled out the things that mattered. Isaac's compass from Desert Storm, Pierce's challenge coin with Hawk's name engraved on it, a photo from 2019 before Kandahar showing her team smiling in the harsh Afghan sun. Hawk was there in the photo, young and strong and alive, his arm around her shoulders, in the casual way of people who trusted each other with their lives. She traced his face with her finger, memorizing features she'd thought lost forever. "I'm coming, brother," she whispered to the image. "Hold on, just a little longer. I'm coming." At 1700 hours, there was a knock at her door. "Come in." Colonel Nathaniel Pierce entered his weathered face grave. He carried a small wooden box, the kind used for presenting military decorations. "Senior Chief, may I have a moment?" "Of course, sir." Pierce sat in the room's single chair, the box resting on his knees. For a long moment, he said nothing, just studied her face, with eyes that had witnessed too many farewells. "I didn't authorize this operation," he said finally. "Chain of command is unclear. The people running this show, they don't answer to me." "I know, sir. Your file access 96 hours ago triggered something. Multiple agencies pinged. Security protocols I've never seen activated." He paused. "I don't know who's really behind this mission. I don't know if I can trust them. But you trust me." "I do, which is why I'm giving you this." He opened the box. Inside was a challenge coin, but different from the one he'd given her before. This one was older worn, carrying the weight of history. "This belonged to your father, Brigadier General Marcus Thorne. He gave it to me the night before his last mission in 1987. Said if anything happened to him, I should give it to his daughter when she was old enough to understand what it meant." Evelyn's breath caught. She took the coin with trembling hands, seeing her father's name engraved on one side and a simple inscription on the other, "Service before self." "He knew," she whispered. "He knew the mission was dangerous. Knew the odds weren't good. But he went anyway, because that's what warriors do. We serve even when it costs us everything." Pierce stood, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "Come back, Evelyn. These kids need you. The Army needs you. And I need to see that my old friend's daughter inherited more than his courage. That she inherited his wisdom about when to fight and when to walk away." "I'll come back, sir. I promise." "Good, because I have an instructor position waiting for you when you do." After he left, Evelyn held both challenge coins, feeling the weight of legacy pressing down on her shoulders. Her father's sacrifice in service of others. Pierce's faith in her ability to honor that sacrifice. Isaac's compass pointing toward home. All of it converging on this moment, this mission, this chance to prove that leaving people behind wasn't failure, just a pause on a road that always led back to redemption. At 1745, she made her way to the helicopter pad. The modified Black Hawk sat waiting rotors beginning their lazy rotation building toward the power needed to lift them into hostile skies. Nomad and Echo were already aboard checking equipment with the methodical precision of operators who knew that survival depended on preparation. They nodded as she climbed in professional acknowledgement between warriors who understood what was coming. Shepard appeared at the last moment, but instead of boarding, he stood at the door. "Change of plans, Wraith. I won't be flying you in." His expression was unreadable. Someone else requested that honor? A figure emerged from the operations building. Female silver hair visible under her flight helmet, moving with the confident stride of someone who'd spent decades in command. Brigadier General Lydia Sterling, Hawk's mother. She climbed into the pilot's seat, without a word, her hands moving across controls with practiced ease. Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't just a rescue operation. This was a mother going after her son. "General Sterling will take you to the LZ," Shepard said. "After that, you're on your own. But she'll be waiting at the extraction point. Nobody gets left behind on her watch." The rotors spun faster, building to takeoff speed. Through the open door, Evelyn could see Fort Bragg, spreading below the base, where her secret had been revealed, where her past had caught up with her present, where everything had changed. Somewhere down there, Fiona was working her shift. Madison was training. Jason was fighting his demons. And all of them believed She would come back. She couldn't let them down. The helicopter lifted off, climbing into the darkening sky. Below, the lights of Fort Bragg grew smaller, fading into the distance as they headed toward hostile territory and uncertain outcomes. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the familiar vibration of the aircraft, the rush of air through the open door, the weight of equipment on her body. All of it achingly familiar, all of it carrying her back to the person she'd been before Kandahar, before the injury, before the guilt, before 4 years of hiding in the shadows of a life half lived. She pulled out Isaac's compass, feeling its weight in her palm. Always find your way home. Hold on, Hawk, she whispered into the rushing wind. The easy days are over, but I'm coming, and this time we both come home. The helicopter banked hard, heading east into the gathering darkness, toward Syria, toward danger, toward a man who'd been waiting 4 years for rescue, toward redemption or death. Either way, Evelyn Thorne was finally going back to war. The helicopter cut through the night sky, like a blade, 6 hours of flight over terrain that shifted from familiar to foreign. Evelyn sat in the rear compartment, her body swaying with the aircraft's rhythm, her mind already at the compound 12 kilometers away. Nomad and Echo occupied the opposite bench, lost in pre-mission rituals. Nomad checked his explosive charges with gentle precision, fingers moving like a surgeon's. Echo tested communication frequencies, his face illuminated by soft electronic glow. They were professionals, the kind who survived because they understood preparation wasn't paranoia, but wisdom written in blood. Through the open door, Evelyn watched the world slide past. Cities became villages, became nothing. Lights surrendered to darkness. And somewhere in that vast emptiness, a man who should have been dead was waiting for someone to remember he existed. She pulled out the photo from 2019. Hawk smiled up at her from better days, his arm around her shoulders, both young enough to believe themselves immortal. The image was crease-worn from 4 years over her heart, a talisman against forgetting. That him? Echo's voice cut through the helicopter's roar. Evelyn nodded. He looks like good people. The best. The words came hard. He covered my retreat in Kandahar, told me to get the wounded out while he held the line. I watched the building come down on him. But he survived. He survived. The weight of it threatened to crush her. 4 years? Because I believed what I saw, instead of what I knew. Nomad looked up from his explosives, Scottish bird gentle. You did what any operator would. Completed the mission. Got your people out. That's not failure, Senior Chief. That's following orders. Orders he gave, so I wouldn't die trying to save him. Which means he succeeded. You lived. Now you return the favor. The simplicity cut through 4 years of guilt like a knife through rope. Hawk had chosen, had traded his freedom for her life. That wasn't her failure. That was his gift, and gifts demanded honor, not guilt. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when we're wheels up with your friend. General Sterling's voice crackled through headsets. 30 minutes to LZ, final equipment check. Questions? Silence. They'd reviewed everything twice. More was noise. Evelyn checked her gear one last time. Modified Glock 19, 3 magazines, combat knife cross-draw, body armor ceramic plates, medical kit, Isaac's compass in her left breast pocket, Pierce's coins in her right, everything where instinct would find it. The helicopter began descent, dropping fast. Evelyn's stomach lurched with familiar adrenaline burn. This was the moment where planning became action, where theory met reality. She closed her eyes, ran through the compound one final time. Main building, 2nd floor, northwest corner. Hawk's cell. Padlocked door, 2 guards, 90-second window. Simple, clean, perfect, which meant something would go wrong. The Black Hawk touched down in a dry riverbed, rotors kicking dust clouds. Evelyn was out before skids settled, boots hitting ground, too solid after 6 hours flight. Clear, Nomad reported to move out. Evelyn took point. 12 kilometers of hostile territory. 12 kilometers that looked short on maps, but felt infinite, when every step might be your last. They moved in tactical column, 3 shadows across desert. No lights. No sound beyond soft boot crunch and measured breathing. Hours passed. The moon rose and set. Stars wheeled overhead in patterns Evelyn remembered from 100 deployments. Her injured lung protested old wounds spiking pain with every breath. But she pushed through, drawing on reserves, built through years of training. Pain was temporary. Failure was permanent. 2 hours in Echo raised his fist. Movement, 200 meters bearing 045. Evelyn dropped weapon ready. Through night vision, 2 figures walking patrol weapons slung casually. Local militia. Not military trained. Just men with guns guarding something nobody would be crazy enough to attack. They were wrong. The patrol passed within 50 meters. Close enough, Evelyn heard their conversation. Arabic regional dialect, talking about families and food. She felt sympathy. They were just doing a job, collecting paychecks, trying to survive. But they stood between her and Hawk. When they passed, the team resumed. 3 more hours of careful approach, watching every shadow, questioning every sound. Finally, the compound. Smaller than imagery suggested. Buildings surrounded by makeshift walls. Guard towers, spotlights, and predictable patterns. Security that assumed competence from defenders, incompetence from attackers. They would learn. Evelyn raised binoculars, scanning until she found it. 2nd floor window. Behind glass, barely visible, a figure sitting motionless. Waiting. Hoping. Believing someone would come. Her hands trembled. First emotion since deployment. She forced them steady. "Target confirmed," she whispered. Nomad and Echo took positions, weapons on guard towers. Guards rotated exactly as predicted. 90 seconds north wall, unwatched. Vulnerability born of routine. Go. They moved. Over the wall in 3 seconds. Inside the compound, they split. Nomad and Echo to guard posts. Evelyn to main building. She reached the door, lock picks appearing like magic. 4 seconds, lock clicked open. She slipped inside, darkness swallowing her. The hallway exactly as described. Dark, silent, smelling of dust and places where hope died. Stairs creaked. She froze, listening. Nothing but compound settling. The room at hall's end. Wooden door, heavy padlock. Evelyn worked her picks fingers, surgical, feeling the mechanism, understanding its secrets. Lock clicked open. She pushed inward. There he was. Benjamin Sterling, Hawk. 4 years older, 30 pounds lighter, eyes too haunted, but alive, breathing, real. "Wraith," voice ragged, rough from disuse. "I knew you'd come." She crossed in 3 strides, knelt, hands on chains binding him. Professional, efficient. But her eyes told everything. 4 years of grief lifting, guilt finding absolution, promise kept. "Can you walk? For you, I can run." Chains fell. Hawk slumped. Evelyn caught him supporting his weight. "Easy days are over," he whispered. "They're code." "They never were, brother. Let's go home." Radio Shepherd, Nomad, Echo. Package secured. Beginning extraction. "Copy. We're clear. Move to exfil." They made it downstairs, through hallway, out the door. Compound quiet, guards neutralized, way clear. Too easy. Evelyn's neck hairs rose. That primitive warning that operated below, thought that had kept her alive when logic said dead. "Move faster," she urged. "Something's wrong." Halfway to the wall, lights blazed. Spotlights turned night to day. Sirens wailed. Armed men poured from every building. 30-plus hostiles, weapons, raised, movements coordinated. Not confusion. Choreography. Contact, Nomad's voice. "Multiple hostiles, all directions." Evelyn's earpiece picked enemy comms. But not Arabic. English. American English. Military terminology. "Target acquired. Wraith protocol confirmed. Notify oversight. Sterling was bait. Shepard, you're clear. We'll handle cleanup." Ice flooded her veins. This wasn't foreign militia. This was U.S. Black Ops. And Shepard was with them. Radio Shepard, Nomad, Echo. This is U.S. Black Op. Alternate extraction, Charlie. Now. Static. Then Shepard's voice, no longer friendly. "Sorry, Wraith. Nothing personal." Operation Silent Thunder embarrassed powerful people. Civilian casualties, friendly fire cover-up. Your team refused to lie. That made you liabilities. Pieces fell with sickening clarity. Silent Thunder hadn't been compromised by Taliban. The Kandahar ambush wasn't bad luck. It was intentional, orchestrated. American operation to eliminate operators who'd witnessed something who'd refused to falsify reports. Hawk was insurance. Shepard continued casual cruelty. We knew you'd come. 4 years we waited. Evelyn's hands tightened. 4 years of hiding wasted, everything manipulation, everything trap. Mission was never rescuing Sterling. It was eliminating the ghost who knew too much. Rage threatened training, but rage got operators killed. Breathe, center, think tactically. Nomad Echo. Alternate extraction. Get Hawk out. Negative. Nomad's determination absolute. We don't leave. That's a direct order. Command authority transcending rank. I'll draw them off. You get Hawk to rally point. Evie, no. Hawk's voice cracked. 4 years ago, you gave an order. I followed. Now I'm ordering you. She met his eyes. This time, I make sure you get home. She didn't wait. Sprinted toward primary LZ away from Hawk, drawing the enemy like magnet pulling iron, using herself as bait. Kandahar again. Choosing death so others could live. Accepting sacrifice because that's what warriors did. Behind her, the enemy followed. All of them. 30-man force committing entirely, leaving Nomad and Echo. Free to extract Hawk. She opened fire. Controlled bursts, tactical retreats. Using structures for cover, constantly moving. 7 minutes became 9, became 12. Evelyn ran with bullets stitching ground, shoulder burning from Gray's ammunition dropping. Down to last magazine when she heard it. Rotor blades, but not at primary LZ. At Charlie, exactly where she'd ordered. Female voice on radio. Different from Shepard, carrying combat stress, but also authority. Wraith, this is Brigadier General Lydia Sterling. I'm bringing you home. Evelyn's mind stuttered. General Sterling. Hawk's mother. Army intelligence? What? No time. Move your ass, Senior Chief. Rally point, Charlie now. Evelyn changed direction, sprinting with everything left. Enemy realized deception, tried cutting off. Too slow. Too late. She vaulted the wall muscles, screaming. Across open ground, bullets kicking sand. Helicopter materialized, door guns laying suppressive fire. Nomad's hand reached down. Come on, Wraith. She grabbed his wrist. Felt strength haul her aboard as feet left ground. Helicopter banked hard, climbing into night, with compound erupting below. Evelyn collapsed against bulkhead, breathing hard blood seeping from wounds. But alive. And beside her, strapped in with Echo monitoring vitals, Hawk was alive too. You're insane, Hawk managed through tears. You were going to die for me. Evelyn laughed, sound surprising her. 4 years releasing in pure joy. You did it first. She looked toward cockpit. General Lydia Sterling, piloting silver hair under helmet hands on controls. And in co-pilot seat, Colonel Pierce. Understanding crashed over her. This hadn't been Shepard's operation. Or rather, it had been but another ran parallel. Counter-operation? Designed not to eliminate Wraith, but capture those trying. Sterling's voice, through headset calm, despite chaos. Senior Chief Thorne, thank you for bringing my son home. Sorry we used him as bait, used you both. But we needed to catch them in act. Needed proof. You used us? Evelyn's voice, flat, exhausted beyond anger. I did. I'll carry that. But 47 operators are alive because we stopped this program. Helicopter banked west toward safety. Below compound burned CIA team scattering. FBI HRT helicopters converged. Shepard, Evelyn asked, captured at primary LZ with 18 team members. Rest in custody or dead. Pierce's grim satisfaction. It's over. Conspiracy exposed. You and Hawk are safe. Evelyn closed eyes, letting words wash over. Safe. After 4 years, running 4 years hiding. Safe. She reached for Hawk's hand, found it waiting. Fingers intertwined, both crying silently, neither needing words. Forgiveness, understanding, bonds that couldn't break. I'm sorry I left you. I'm sorry I made you leave. But we're here now, together. That's all that matters. Isaac's voice from Fort Bragg, thousands of miles away. Wraith, you copy. I copy, Sergeant. Emotion breaking through. I'm coming home. I knew you would. Compass never fails. She pulled out the compass, feeling its weight. Desert Storm 91 guided him through 100 missions. Thank you, Isaac, for everything. Thank you for proving old warriors can teach young ones. Now, get back. We have work to do. Flight home took 8 hours. Evelyn spent it watching Hawk sleep, staring at darkness rushing past, processing weight of survival. Sterling brought coffee, sat beside her. I've been investigating CIA black site program 2 years, since intelligence said my son might be alive. The deeper I dug, the bigger it was. How many involved? How much they do to keep it buried? Why, tell me? Because you deserve to know. Your team didn't die from bad luck. They died because they had integrity. Refused to lie about witnessing illegal detention torture. Chose honor over convenience. Sterling paused, weathered face carrying mother's weight. 6 operators from Team 8 witnessed that compound. 5 died in Kandahar. Hawk captured, you sole survivor. 4 years they've been tying up that loose end. By using Hawk as bait. Yes, sorry we couldn't tell you. Sorry we let you walk into danger. But we needed you to react naturally. If you'd known, they would too. Evelyn, quiet processing manipulation magnitude. Are we really safe now? You are. Conspiracy exposed. Senator-level investigations launched. People responsible facing federal charges. CIA director resigned. This goes to the top. Everyone knows. Sterling met her eyes, mother behind, general visible. I can't give back 4 lost years. Can't undo pain, guilt, fear. But I can give this, you're free. Truly free. To live without looking over shoulder. To serve without wondering when past catches up. To build future instead of running from history. Evelyn nodded, unable to speak. Sterling squeezed her shoulder, returned to cockpit. Hawk's stirred eyes opening slowly. Color returning. Where are we? Heading home. Few more hours to Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg. Wonder in voice. I never thought I'd see it again. 4 years in that cell, I convinced myself I'd die there. That I'd been forgotten. I never forgot. Not a single day. I know. That's what kept me alive. Knowing Wraith was still out there. Still fighting. Still refusing to quit. They sat in comfortable silence, watching sun rise through the window. Dawn. Over a world suddenly full of possibility instead of threat. 3 weeks after mission, Evelyn visited Hawk at Walter Reed. He sat up in bed. Color returned 30 pounds to gain but alive. They're calling it the Thorn Protocol, he said. New instructor program integrating SEAL training. Heard you're running it. Heard you're joining once cleared. Wraith and Hawk teaching next generation. His smile carried shared history. We always said if we survived, we'd pay forward. We survived. Not everyone did. Hawk sobered. I think about them. Rest of Team 8. Every day. Evelyn moved to window. But I'm understanding something. Survival isn't mission's end. It's the next one's beginning. What do you mean? We lived. That gives responsibility. To honor their sacrifice by living well. By serving with integrity, they died protecting. By teaching that truth matters more than convenience. Honor isn't negotiable. Warriors serve principles bigger than themselves. Hawk nodded, understanding dawning. You sound like your father. Isaac told me about him. His last mission. How he died covering retreat, choosing sacrifice so others could live. She touched Pierce's coin, her father's coin. I spent 4 years thinking I'd failed. But I understand now. Service isn't measured in survival. It's measured in what you're willing to give up for something bigger. Your father would be proud. I hope so. 6 months after mission, Fort Bragg's instructor training facility stood complete. Modern building, state-of-art equipment, designed for Thorn Protocol, already gaining military recognition. Evelyn stood before her first class. 24 students, 8 female, 16 male, arranged in rows. Eyes bright with anticipation, respect, hunger for meaning. Corporal Madison Reeves sat front row, red hair, gleaming in sunlight through windows. The trainee who'd watched Evelyn's secret revealed who'd cried, understanding women could be warriors without apology. Corporal Jason Rivera was their guest instructor for PTSD awareness. Hand, steady voice, strong demons managed. Proof warriors could face invisible wounds with visible courage. And back row, Private First Class, Sienna Keller. 22, Donovan's younger sister, carrying different values. She'd applied specifically to learn from the woman her brother tried breaking, proving Keller could mean something better. Master Sergeant Isaac Grayson stood beside Evelyn as deputy commander. 62, 38 years service representing generational bridge. His presence sent message. Old guard respected this, believed in it, would help build it into something mattering. Lieutenant Benjamin Sterling joined cadre after medical clearance. He'd teach tactical patient survival mindset, mental resilience. Testament that captured didn't mean defeated, that darkness couldn't extinguish warrior spirit. Evelyn looked at students, seeing herself reflected, seeing who she'd been before Kandahar, before injury and guilt and hiding. 4 years ago, I thought my service was finished. Her voice carried clear, strong. I thought I'd failed. My team failed my mission, failed everyone mattering. She paused, meeting eyes across rows. Today, I understand mission never ends. We're not here teaching you how to kill. We're here teaching why to serve. Madison sat straighter, understanding fundamental shift. Real strength isn't dominating others. It's protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Evelyn's gaze swept the room. That's warrior's code. What separates soldiers from mercenaries? What my father taught me, what I'm teaching you. Isaac stepped forward, weathered face carrying wisdom weight. I've served since '87, seen every kind of warrior. His voice filled space with earned authority. The best ones who survive and matter, aren't the loudest. They're the ones choosing restraint, who know their power, but don't abuse it. He gestured toward Evelyn. Master Chief Thorne embodies that. Learn from her. Not just tactics and techniques, but philosophy. Understanding that we serve something bigger than ourselves. Class began. Weapons handling, tactical movement, decision-making under pressure. But woven through every lesson was deeper teaching. Honor, integrity, responsibility that came with capability. That evening, as sun painted Fort Bragg in gold and crimson, Isaac found Evelyn at the range. Same place her secret was revealed 6 months ago, where everything changed. They stood together in comfortable silence, two warriors separated by decades, but united by understanding. Students trained in background, Madison leading squad drill with fierce competence, Jason coaching another soldier through breathing techniques demons managed enough to help others. Hawk teaching tactical patience to hanging on every word group. Old warriors don't retire, Isaac said finally, voice carrying gentle wisdom. We just train next generation to carry the torch. Evelyn finished, smiling at familiar exchange. Isaac reached into pocket, pulled out something small. His SEAL trident from Desert Storm 91. Tarnished, but recognizable, still carrying everything it represented. Keep this until you find someone worthy to pass it to. Evelyn took it, feeling history in her palm. That's hell of a responsibility. You've proven you can handle it. Isaac's gray eyes held hers. Your father would be proud of who you've become. Not just warrior, but teacher, guardian, woman who chose restraint when destruction would have been easier. Thank you, Isaac, for everything, for seeing me when invisible, for believing when I'd stopped believing in myself. Thank you for reminding old soldier that best battles are ones we fight for, next generation. They watched sun touch horizon, painting world in fire and shadow. Distance taps began playing, mournful notes drifting across base like benediction, honoring all who'd served, sacrifice chosen duty over comfort. Evelyn pulled out her father's challenge coin, the one Pierce gave her. Held it up, inscription, catching fading light, service before self. Beside it, she placed Pierce's other coin, the one with Hawk's name. 2 metal pieces, carrying legacy weight, promise hope. Easy days are over, she whispered to gathering darkness. They always were, Isaac replied. But real work-building warriors serving with honor, that's just beginning. As night claimed Fort Bragg, lights appeared across base, windows glowing warm against darkness. Soldiers finishing duties, heading to barracks, preparing for another service day. And in training facility, new generation learned what being strong meant. Not through violence or domination, but restraint. Through integrity, through choosing protection over destruction. Evelyn Thorne, Senior Chief SEAL Team 8. Call sign. Wraith stood at center, no longer invisible, no longer hiding, no longer running from past transformed into purpose. She was home, truly home. And the real mission of building something better than before was only beginning. American flag snapped in evening breeze, stars and stripes visible even in gathering darkness. Symbol of everything they fought for, everything protected, everything sworn to defend, not just nation, but ideal, promise. Legacy passed generation to generation, warrior to warrior, teacher to student. Easy days were over, but important work had just begun. In her pocket, both coins pressed against her heart. Her father's sacrifice, Hawk's survival, Isaac's wisdom, Pierce's faith, all of it converging in this moment, this place, this purpose. She looked at her students. Tomorrow, they'd learn tactics. Tonight, they'd learn something more important. That respect was earned through character, not rank. That strength was measured in restraint, not violence. That true warriors served principles bigger than themselves. The sun disappeared below horizon. Night fell complete, and somewhere in that darkness, new warriors were being born. Not through violence, but through understanding. Not through domination, but through protection. Not through fear, but through honor. The easy days were over. They always had been. But real warriors didn't need easy. They just needed purpose. And Evelyn Thorne had finally found hers.